Florida State loses again. Miami almost goes down. Here's what we learned from ACC football in week 5.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers. We are Locked On ACC. Make sure you make us your first listen, your first watch each and every day. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started on this loaded episode. We will talk about how the ACC and the Big 12, for that matter, might be about to lose some college football playoff bids because the SEC and the Big 10, they're getting a little greedy out there. They're getting greedy. We'll talk about the ACC players of the week, but Kenton Gibbs, we got to talk about some games over the weekend. What was the outcome or the game that either shocked you most or just plain old captivated you the most?
Obviously, it has to be Miami, Virginia Tech. I mean, it didn't shock me, but that game was as entertaining as we have seen from college football. And it was pretty much everything that we love about college football baked down into one football game. I mean, what more could you really ask for than to see, I constantly kept making a joke, hey, Miami's going to have to play a Power 4 team that's going to have their head coach at the end of the season. And lo and behold, that's their first struggle of the season. That's the first time that they look human all season. But in all seriousness, you had that. You had the intrigue of the final play and all that went into that. And we'll get into that a little later. But that one was one that it was such a captivating game. I would be, remiss if I didn't say that the most shocking was the utter dismantling of Florida State down there in Dallas. I would be lying to you if I said, yeah, I saw the Pony Express not even beating them, making it fairly non-competitive. I think we can both agree to that, Donald. I don't think that game was competitive for a majority of it. And you sit here and you say to yourself, the defensive line that was supposed to be world beaters looked human. You say to yourself, the offensive line that was supposed to be the bullies of the block, they have been bullied. They have been dominated. And you say to yourself, how long does the DJU experience truly last? So all in all, I mean, those two games are the two that I look at as most entertaining. And the one that I was just like, what am I seeing? We knew Florida State was bad. We did not know that they were the pits and depths of hell.
By the way, to stay on that for a second, the DJU experience, it may now be over because he suffered a hand injury in that game, and I'm starting to see some articles being written coming out of Tallahassee that and I love the word that they used is concern. There is concern that DJU's hand injury might be a long-term thing. I don't know if the concern is that they might lose him for the rest of the year or if the concern is they might not lose him for the rest of the season with how he's played this year. But,
I'm going to tell you, whenever I see a backup play or whenever I see a starter playing this poorly and not being benched, I know the backup is probably worse. Because anytime you have a backup that's even near the level, if you're playing this bad, throw the backup in there, man. We got to get somebody in there. I don't know what they're seeing in practice. I don't know if DJ is just a walk-through All-American or something, but this is nasty. This is, in the words of the Grinch, stank, stunk, because that's what Florida State has done all season long so far.
I mean, I will tell you that the timing would stink. Like if DJU can't go this week, and Mike Norvell has him as an or on the depth chart for the first time this year. It's DJ Uiagalelei or Brock Len as the starting quarterback. But you would figure if DJ has one really good game in him this year, wouldn't it be the game against Clemson, his former team, right? That if there was one opportunity for him to go out there and play with 10,000% motivation, it would be to stick it to his old team. And now it's so early in the week, we're not going to know for sure, but it seems like there's a legit chance that Uiagalelei cannot go this week. So that would be unfortunate. Now, going back to the Miami versus Virginia Tech game, I watched it, with my orange and green colored glasses on, but I was incredibly disappointed in almost everyone, with the exceptions being Cam Ward. He made 3 mistakes in that game, but he put his Superman cape on in the fourth quarter. And so rarely do you see a quarterback commit 3 turnovers and somehow raise his stock in the same game. Ward managed to do that with the way he finished that game. That was one player who, for me, is exempt from criticism. Another player exempt from criticism is tight end Elijah Arroyo, who had a couple of big catches in the game, including a long touchdown. But he also, Elijah Arroyo, I don't know if you saw the play, Kenton, on a throw. Cam Ward basically threw what would have been a pick 6 to a former Miami backer, Caleb Spencer. Of course, it was Caleb Spencer, who was about to waltz into the end zone. And Elijah Arroyo, who was on the other corner of the field, ran about 22 miles an hour from one end of the field to the other, one corner to the other, to track down the play and save the touchdown on the interception. That was incredible. And then Malik Bryant, the Miami defensive end, who was also in on special teams and blew up the ridiculous call that Brent Pry made for a fake field goal, which was absolutely absurd. Now, Kenton, before we talk about that final play and whether the officials got it right or not, I want to say something here. And I said this on Locked On Canes as well. I know that when a lot of people are upset about the way the game ended, right? You didn't, you wanted Virginia Tech to win on the Hail Mary. You didn't think there was enough evidence to overturn the call. I really feel like Brent Pry is escaping a lot of criticism.
Yes.
Everyone's focused on the final play. And listen, I say this as someone who was cheering for Miami to win the game. If Brent Pry had made one less dumb decision, Miami loses that game.
The field goal. Why would you fake it there? All of the momentum is on your side. You do not need and this is the problem with today's coaches in a lot of regards. Everybody's always wanting the knockout punch, when sometimes death by 1,000 cuts is the way to get it done. When you're playing a team like Miami, your goal should never be, I'm going to hit them with the knockout punch. You know what your goal should be? We're up by a good amount. Let's just keep demoralizing them a little bit more. Let's see if they have the countenance to come back on us without us giving something to them. Let's see if they can come take it. I don't think they take it if you just take the 3 points there, which would have put them up. What was it? It would have been
that
like
would have put them up
7?
13. That would have put them up 13. And if they had been up an extra 3 points, Kenton, they wouldn't have needed a touchdown on that final drive. They would have just needed a field goal. So that Hail Mary situation would have never happened.
And that's my point exactly. If you don't do buffoonery and clownery, you come away with wins. Why did you need to go for it then? What did you gain? Hypothetically, right? Even if you go for it and succeed, do you still not have to gain, 15 yards or so to get a touchdown? Kick the damn field goal. What is this? That's not Beamer ball. That's not the bring your lunch pail to work mentality that Virginia Tech is known for. And the clock management at the end of the game. What are we doing? Can your players not adjust 2 plays at once? What is happening there? There are many, many moments where I look at this game and pride starts to come into question in a meaningful way that he did not before.
Yeah.
Because there were just so many moments where, and the worst part about it is this. Normally I say, you only look dumb because it didn't work. If it works, you look great. Even if that fake field goal works, if you still have to take a field goal later in that drive, you just look like an idiot because you wasted a fake. You put a fake on tape when it didn't guarantee you a touchdown. Why? For what reason? The clock management situation. Again, you are running the ball effectively all game long. Miami defenders, I don't know what's going on, but they were slipping and sliding off guys. Like Johnson & Johnson figured their main buyer of baby oil was out of business, so they had to make up the bread somehow. They were slipping and sliding off by y'all too. Yeah. You go away from them late. Why? What are we doing here? Again, I like Kyron Drones. I had much higher hopes for him than he has played this season. I think this game he played fine. He played well enough to win the game.
He played very well, I thought.
Yeah, he played well enough to win the game. I wouldn't say it was a superstar banner performance, but again, there was just a lot of things in that game where I'm just like, Pry, this is on you because your players did more than enough to win. If you just make, like you said, one less boneheaded decision, you leave Miami with a win. You take the air out of Cam Ward's Heisman campaign. You take the air out of Coach Cristobal, but instead you'll have to, oh, well, we're going to get cutesy. We're Virginia Tech. We do special teams. So we're going to get cute on special teams right here.
Yeah, and I feel like Brent Pry, like he gets bailed out by the controversy because the only thing anybody's talking about is the Hail Mary. We're like, I'm sure a lot of people didn't watch the game. They just saw that play and they're reacting to it. But I want to get Kenton's take on that play when we come back. We're also on this episode, we're going to talk about the ACC players of the week because we got another strong batch this week. And we'll talk about the SEC and the Big Ten trying to snatch up more and more automatic college football playoff bids and where this leaves the ACC and the Big 12. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And you know we're only getting started with FanDuel. Guys, we've been making money. We've been having an amazing time all season long. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. They're giving you free money on there, guys. And folks, we have a huge weekend of ACC games coming up. Miami travels out to Cal. They're 12.5-point favorites. Clemson's probably going to do some pretty obscene things to Florida State this weekend. If you want to get action on these games, FanDuel is the spot for you. Just go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out our other shows. Kenton Gibbs does an awesome job on Locked On Wolfpack. CJ Bailey and NC State bounce back with a win this weekend. I also host Locked On Canes, so it's been a crazy past couple of days for me reacting to that Virginia Tech game. Kenton, to me, I think a lot of the outrage from that final play comes from the fact that the officials initially ruled it a touchdown, which they seemed very unsure of that. It's like nobody really had any idea who came up with that ball, whether it was secure or not, but they ruled a touchdown on the field. Because something that I kept seeing from college football fans was, I saw a lot of people say, I don't think it was a catch, but how did they have enough evidence to overturn it? Which is like a weird take to have if you're that outraged by it. But they end up determining that, the ball, when it was not secured, was touched by a Miami player. I didn't even realize which Miami player it was at first because, they had the Hail Mary hands team on the field. So it was actually Miami wide receiver Isaiah Horton, switched his jersey because his regular number 2 is worn by another defense player. So he had like a generic number 43 jersey on, and he was the one who was touching the ball while he was out of bounds while it was not secure. So by rule, it was ruled an incomplete pass. So it seems pretty cut and dry by the rules, but I get why there's controversy behind it because it was such a crazy play, and it was so crazy the way it unfolded, and a 7-minute review that happened on the field.
Yeah, so first thing first, I want to say this, right? If we're going to look at a big play controversy and all that, we have to admit that this is a moment where, again, Pry should be catching more heat, even though it isn't the last play like it was for Miami with the non-kneeling situation, where their back was clearly down. Like, let's make that very clear. The back for Miami was clearly down in that moment, and everybody was just like, oh, you should have never put yourself in that position, which both things are true, though. Both things are true. And then this one, I think both things are true again. Both things are true that Pry made idiotic decision after idiotic decision after idiotic decision that had them in that situation where they needed a Hail Mary. But what is also true to me, when I watched that play, I said, there's no way they call that a completion. They call it a completion. I said, oh, there's no way they can overturn that. Because, again, it's not about whether or not it's complete or incomplete. It's about conclusive evidence. You need conclusive evidence one way or the other for if you are reversing a call. If you're rocking with a call, you don't need that much evidence. You can just say, rule on the field stands. Boom. Whatever it is, it is. But in this moment, to me, it felt like it should have been a ruling on the field stands more so than anything else, because I believe that the new rules surrounding catches, especially going to the ground, did something wonky in terms of like if you land on another player, but you are inbounds, and how that works out to be. So it's a strange.
It's a weird technicality.
Yes, it's a weird rule.
It's a rule. It's a rule that 99% of us don't understand.
Exactly.
But if they did determine to me that it was touched by an out of bounds player, and if that it seems like they found cut and dry evidence for a weird rule that people don't know about.
Yeah, and either way you cut it or slice it, to me, I think you stick with the ruling. But in that moment, again, don't let Pry off the hook. Don't let Pry off the hook. Those guys did enough. Drones did enough. Tootin did enough. The tight end who was going off in the first half, they did enough as a unit to get this thing done. But Virginia Tech's defensive line, linebackers, where the hell you been? Where the hell have you been? Yeah. They need to get multiple lunch pails because them fellas were filling gaps. They were on the run game. They were everywhere. And so it took literally a Herculean effort. It took Superman stuff. It took, I'm being sacked, but I'm going to chip it out to a tight end who's going to go for 20 because nobody's accounting for him, because that's not how this play should work type of stuff for Miami to win this game. So credit to Virginia Tech. They showed up in a massive way. They showed up and they were just by the hairs on their chinny chin. They missed this one. But again, that last play, it sucked. There were bad calls all throughout the game. That holding call was one of the worst holdings I've ever seen. And I'm saying that as a defensive lineman who thinks that offensive linemen get away with holds every play. That was not a hold. But again, you cannot count on ACC officiating one way or the other. You can't.
No, you can't.
You can't. So, the refs giveth, the refs taketh away, especially if you're not the darling in this game and you know that you have an uphill battle. Don't count on the refs. Don't count on the refs to give you nothing. You've got to accept, hey, we may be an 8-ball in that regard, and maybe, again, we should take our 13-point lead, because I want to see how they bounce back from that more so than a 10-point lead where we just gave them a lot of momentum, because that drive that they had was a long drive where you're taking the wind and the air out of Rock Hard Stadium. The fans are cheering less, and then you give it back because you want to get cute. What a bozo move.
Yeah. And it was one of the craziest games. Like I kind of am jealous that you got to watch it as like a neutral, because I'm watching it cheering for Miami. Like I was breathing into a paper bag during the fourth quarter. I was having panic attacks. It was insane. And like by the time they actually made the final call of the last play, like I had already gone through every possible stage of grief and panic that I don't think my demeanor would have been any different if Miami had lost the game. And just like on the final Miami touchdown drive, you felt like there was some divine intervention, because on that same, you talked about the play to the tight end, like Cam Ward had basically been sacked twice, escaped from both sacks, flips it out to Riley Williams, the tight end, who rumbles down to the 2-yard line. Prior to that, you had that catch by Xavier Restrepo where he had literally fallen over and still somehow managed to reach his hands up and get the grab. You had a bad snap that Ward was able to somehow pull out of the dirt and hand it off for a 5-yard gain. And that play could have easily been a turnover. So it was absolutely nuts. A couple of other notable things around the ACC. How about this for notable, Kenton? Duke football. They win again. They come from way behind. They come down 20 points against North Carolina to win 21-20. And of course, doing it against their rivals has to be even better. Manny Diaz has Duke 5-0 for the first time since 1994. As much as we praised Mike Elko the last few years, he never had Duke football 5-0. Here they are.
Wow, I'm so sad to talk about Mac Brown losing once again. William Brown, as they call him, you should still coach. Don't quit on that team. I heard that you quit in the locker room. Come on now, William. Keep coaching them boys. They need you. Them boys need you, okay? Keep the coaching job coming. But in all seriousness, what a job by Manny Diaz, right? We talk about inferior opponent. I'm not saying that UNC is the class of the conference. However, that is a very serious rivalry. That is a very serious, and I'm going to tell you, the Duke and UNC basketball rivalry, as much as that's a rivalry, I think it's a rivalry because they're both very good. I don't think it's a rivalry in the sense of I hate you. I think that every time you could do anything. And if you're doing it near me, you're doing it too close. You're doing it in the wrong way. Football, it is like that. That battle for the liberty, oh, it is absolutely like that. From trash in locker rooms to all that type of stuff, they do not like each other. And to see Manny Diaz come out on top here, again, we could say Duke has played inferior opponents, but at some point in time, we got to give them their guts. They are 5-0 for the first time since when, Dono?
94. 30 years was the last time.
I was not born yet. I am bald, have a lifetime worth of regrets, and have much too intimate of a relationship with a cognac known as Hennessy. You understand? Those are 3 facts about a human being that was born after the last time Duke was 5-0. So you've got to give Manny Diaz, you've got to give Malik Murphy, you've got to give this largely rebuilt defense, because there were so many guys who left, who graduated or hit the portal with Elko. This team is finding ways to win. A lot like we say about Pitt, they're the inverse. They don't have the greatest offense in the world, but they continue to find ways. They continue to just score one more point than you. That's all we need, and they showed it against UNC.
Yeah, and you can see why, Manny Diaz, who's their head coach, has been, one of the more successful defensive coordinators in the country. Did an awesome job at Penn State. When he was DC at Miami, he did great. It was just a whole different thing when he was the head coach. But I strongly believe that coaches can learn from mistakes and they can evolve. And I think Manny Diaz is probably a much better head coach today than he was 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, who was Bill Belichick before he got to New England? Like he was fired by the Cleveland Browns before he ended up becoming the greatest of all time. I think coaches can learn and evolve. And when we come back, man, there's still a couple more things I want to talk about here. I also want to talk about SMU's systematic destruction of Florida State. And we also we got to talk about how the ACC and the Big 12 might lose a lot of leverage in 2026 with the new college football playoff format. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're nowhere near done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And we already know you're keeping it locked to Game Time. This is the only ticket app that Kenton and I use. Guys, the prices actually get better the closer you get to the event. They reward you for procrastinating, which is unbelievable. I've gotten so many great deals on tickets to events in my area down in South Florida, including Florida Panthers playoff games, Miami Hurricanes football games. Guys, you want to check this out. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a Floridian to enjoy the great benefits of Game Time. You can check this out no matter where you live. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Guys, my favorite features on the Game Time app, the all-in pricing feature. They show you all the hidden fees. Well, they're not hidden because they show you all the fees and totals up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Make sure you turn in the all-in pricing feature. Guys, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy on Game Time. And they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen today. Make sure for your next listen, you check out Locked On College Football. My guy Spencer McLaughlin does an awesome job taking you through all the big games, all the big storylines. We're going to talk about one of those big storylines in just a minute. But meanwhile, Kenton, I mean, and full credit to SMU because they played great. But have you ever seen a preseason top 10? A team that was, almost a consensus pick to repeat as conference champions. I'm talking about the Florida State Seminoles, of course, go from 13-0 regular season and ACC championship game last year to 1-4 and getting almost mercy ruled by SMU. 42-16 was the final score. I don't think I've seen a harder fall than this one.
Never in life. And let's talk about some of the things that were so astounding from that game, shall we?
Yeah.
If you were to say at the beginning of the season, SMU beats Florida State, how would you believe they do it, Donald?
Probably get a couple of timely takeaways and they
Mm-hmm.
win by like a last second field goal, like a really
Mm-hmm.
close, grinded out, like, oh, what a miracle game, like something like that.
Absolutely. And if they were to, have a grinded out miracle game, what do you think the stats would look like? Who do you think would you think SMU would get it done through the air, on the ground? What do you think that would look
I mean, I would have thought that Preston Stone would be the quarterback and
like?
that they
Mm-hmm.
would be probably throwing for 350 yards in the game. That's
Okay.
what I would think.
So SMU only came up 100 yards short of that passing goal, but you know what they did do?
What
They
did they do?
outrushed Florida State
Yeah.
204 yards to 63.
Wow.
For
Wow.
every 1 yard that Florida State gained on the ground, SMU gained 3.5. I'm
Yeah.
going to get it done. That ain't going to get it done. I mean, that is FSU is getting pushed around on both lines of scrimmage in a way this is unheard of.
Yeah.
This is unheard of from a top 10 team ever, especially a team that, again, this was supposed to be your calling card. This was supposed to be, this is your identity. This is who we are. This is how we're going to do it. This is why we're going to do it. Wow. Wow. Shout out to SMU. They deserve all the love. They deserve all the credit. They absolutely, I mean, you want to talk about BTA, belt to ass, as the kids like to say today. Well, guess what? SMU took off their belt and said, "Where's that report card at, son?"
Yeah.
And there was nothing but F's down the road for FSU because this was not pretty at all. I mean, wow, what a game by SMU. They deserve all the love, especially, I think the biggest part of irony out of this, and I'm going to let it go after this, but I think the biggest part of irony, in Florida State's lawsuit, they specifically went out of their way. They ducked Cal and Stanford to say, SMU? SM who is in our conference? And they said, oh, nobody. Just us guys who are going to rush for 200 yards on you. Just us guys that are going to hold y'all to about 3-point-something yards per play. That's who is in the conference now. You may make more money than us, but you don't make more wins than us, which is very impressive. Very impressive.
Well, and Florida State would argue that they don't make enough revenue to win games. I mean, SMU's not making any revenue from the ACC. Like they bought their way into the conference. So Florida State doesn't make enough revenue to beat a team that's paying to be in the ACC, apparently.
Again, you and I are both asking questions that are important here because if the revenue is the problem, does Georgia Tech make more than them? Does Boston College make more than them? Does Memphis make more than them? Does Cal Berkeley make more than them? Does SMU make more than them? I think you can combine a lot of these teams and they probably still make less. Their budget for football is probably smaller than Florida State. So, again, I have said this for a while, and Florida State right now is confirming my theory. There's an upper limit to how much you can spend on position. Now, how much you can pay the players, that's different. That's different. Okay, you can never pay for too many good players. There's an upper limit on facilities where it's like, all right, bro, stop. Like you have everything that you could want. You have everything that any real football player needs to be his peak self. At this point in time, you're just getting things for kicks and giggles and whatnot.
All right, so let's take a look at this report that came through ESPN, and nothing about this is surprising. I mean, as soon as the Big Ten and the SEC they made their big additions this season, they formed this like joint advisory board where they're like, well, we're not thinking about breaking away from the NCAA. We just wanted to have some chats. So here's this report from ESPN. Sources in both leagues, that being both conferences, Big Ten and the SEC, told ESPN on Monday that they would prefer to have potentially 4 automatic bids each to the playoff when the next contract begins in 2026. And that's when they expand to 14. So, I mean, they're going to leverage this. Again, we don't have any way of knowing whether this is going to pass or not, Kenton, but the fact that they're leaking this to ESPN must mean that either they feel good about it or maybe it means it's like a Hail Mary for them. But you could potentially see in 2026, the SEC and the Big Ten could control 8 of 14 college football playoff bids, meaning there's only 6 spots for, the other potentially for the other power fours and for the G5. So they're trying to really monopolize this thing.
Well, wait a minute. Let's take it a bit further, shall we, Dono? If you do this math correctly, they get 4, right? They're pushing for 4. That's the number. And then you got the ACC champ and the Big 12 champ. That puts you up to 6. And then you got the highest rated group of 5 that pushes you to 7. So at that point in time in the field, you're going to have how many spots left for everybody else?
Right.
All of the Big 12, all of the G5, all of the ACC are left fighting for those 7 spots when, again, you got a guaranteed 4. But here's the thing. Is anybody surprised by this? Is anybody shocked? Is anybody in awe? I can't believe it. I can't believe that the Big 10 and the SEC would do it. They have time and time again made it a proverbial pissing contest. And I hate those because everybody's leg just gets wet. This is one of those moments where they're trying to big bro themselves once again and say, we demand 4. We are worthy of 4, so on and so forth. I think it should function in the same way for all of the Power 4 or however you want to cut it and slice it, okay? I think you should have your guaranteed champions and the next highest team out of both of the out of all of the Power 3. I think that should be, or a Power 4 rather. I think those next 2 up should have guaranteed in. All 4 of your champions and the next 2 highest in. And then after that, you see your at-larges and all that. But I mean, with what they did originally with demanding more spots when it was expanded to 12, how did we expect them to not do this when it was expanded to 14?
And it's hard to stop them because I'll admit they have a ton of leverage because their leverage is, well, okay, if you don't want to give us these concessions, we'll just walk away and do our own championship. And that'll be the real championship, they can say, because they are on paper, of course, the 2 best leagues in college football. I'm not questioning that. So they can threaten, we'll just leave the table. We'll form our own big kids table somewhere else. So they're going to get a certain amount of concessions because they've got a lot of leverage.
I'm going to tell you this. The best play for the ACC and the Big 12 right now, work on the Big 10 because the Big 10 is in for a reckoning. They may not be aware of it, but Ryan Day and that team, I don't think they have what it takes toughness-wise. Sharon Moore in Michigan, Sharon Moore is not your guy. Oregon is Oregon. I mean, with all due respect, doesn't matter who you put in that seat. They'll always be close, but they'll always be the bridesmaid. USC, Lincoln Riley, he's Lincoln Riley.
We see it. Limitations.
He's Lincoln Riley. You're going to see these teams time and time again. The Big Ten's in for a reckoning in a couple years. Meanwhile, the SEC's got all these 17-year-olds out there doing things that are unheard of. Hey, more power to you. You got it. But if I'm the Big 10, if I'm the Big 12 and ACC right now, I'm going to the Big 10 and saying, hey, listen, you do realize that alliance is only going to last for so long. Didn't y'all already have an alliance thing before? How'd that work out? Listen, they're going to kick you off the island eventually. You come join us and make sure that college football as we know it exists in the future. We'll be all right. Or when you want to break away, you'll have multiple conferences to back you. Not just us 2 big boys will take our ball and go home. You could say one of the 2 big boys and all the little boys are coming with you. Let's think about it. Let's think about it. Let's think about this logically.
Well, I appreciate the time and great inputs as always here from Kenton Gibbs. Check him out at Locked On Wolfpack and at TGIF_Kenton on X. I am Alex Dono. Check me out on Locked On Canes at Alex Dono. And we will talk to everyone next time. We're going to have the squad together later on this week.
We are.
Syracuse won. Syracuse won against Holy Cross. So Jackson's going to be in a good mood this week. I feel bad. Like, I wouldn't blame Isaac Shade if he just didn't show up this week because he comes off. He got blown out by James. He's locked on UNC, locked on Tar Heels. He got blown out by James Madison. Then he, blows almost a 3-touchdown lead to Duke. But Isaac's a great dude. He'll probably still show up because he's just a mensch. Isaac is just a great guy.
I couldn't laugh at the Tar Heels last week, but boy, have I got my ha-has and kikis prepared for the squad this week. I'm ready. I'm locked and I'm loaded.
Absolutely. So we'll talk to you guys again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On ACC. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.